Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. My dear viewers and students, Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Welcome back to Amreena Mehraj tutorials. As promised, I'm back again today with a video lecture on genetic disorders. Basically, it's understanding genetic disorders because we are trying to lay a foundation to understand genetic disorders thoroughly. Before we get to the video part where I'm delivering the lecture, I want you people to be attentive for a few seconds and listen to what I'm speaking. That's very, very important. My dear students, make sure that you have watched Understanding Genetic Disorders Part 1 because this video is Understanding Genetic Disorders Part 2 and it is in continuation with that video, okay, with the earlier video which I have uploaded 2 days back. Other than that, some of the students suggested that I should use NCERT textbook images. I have used them today, so you'll find your NCERT textbook images today in my lecture. Other than that, I have discussed Mendelism in nutshell because some of the students were requesting for a crash course. So I wanted to make this video beneficial. So in this video today, you will find that I am explaining basic Mendelism also in complete details, okay? And I have made an introduction for pedigree analysis also in today's video. So this video is going to be very, very fruitful for NEET students as well as for class 12th board appearing students, okay? So let's get started, and don't forget to like, share and subscribe to my channel and comment because your comments are my motivation. Let's get started. So you will have these single gene. Let me put down this in one box. So you have these single gene disorders, okay? Where is the other category? That is gone. That is chromosomal disorders. I have deleted that for the time being. We'll be focused with this particular stuff. Okay. So single gene disorder, single gene disorder, Mendelian single gene disorder, mutation in a single gene. Now there will be a case that some of these disorders will be involving what? Some will be involving mutation in what? Mutation in 6 chromosomes. In some of these disorders, what will be involved? Sex chromosome will be involved. In other such disorders, what will be involved is that your autosomes will be involved. Pay attention. Okay. If sex chromosome is involved, what do you call these disorders then? Oh. It opened. Okay. If sex chromosome is involved, you will call them sex-linked disorders. Sex-linked Mendelian disorders. And they'll be called autosomal disorders. Okay. Now the question is, in certain cases, what will be involved is a recessive allele will be involved. In certain cases, a dominant allele will be involved. Okay, I'll make you understand that over here. So again, you will have this category A and category B. So I'll say 1A and 1B. Okay, this is 1. So I give you 1A or 1B. Now 1A will again be having 2 types. How it will be having 2 types? Remember, as far as X is concerned, we have to take which sex chromosome? X chromosome, okay? So we're talking about X-linked disorders. So again, if sex chromosome is involved, the defect is in the sex chromosome, mutation is in the sex chromosome, mutation is in the X chromosome. Again, you have the 2 types. Either the dominant allele is involved, either the recessive allele is involved. So I'll say right down over here, either the recessive allele, you can say gene for all that matter, no problem. I'll make you understand. Recessive allele involved, or you can say recessive allele is mutated, or a dominant allele is mutated, mutation in the dominant form, mutation of a recessive form. Accordingly, this type of disorder will be called what? It will be called sex-linked, what? It will be called sex-linked recessive disorder. So since we have taken X chromosome, shall I write down X-linked recessive disorders? That means the mutation is in the X chromosome, but it's a recessive mutation. Recessive allele is involved. Recessive allele is mutated. Okay, and this will be called what? It will be called X-linked. Such disorder will be called X-linked dominant disorder. I'll be giving you, because I told you earlier they are Mendelian, so you have Mendel's terms, recessive and dominant. Similarly, autosomal disorder. So this is now what? This is the subtype of 1A. Okay, so this is 1A subtype. This is sex chromosome, sex-linked disorder subtype. Okay, so over here, let me give you now the classification for this autosomal disorder. Again, they will be now what? They'll be again what? They'll be dominant autosomal or recessive autosomal. So shall I write down like this? Since I wrote down recessive, I'll write down with green. If recessive gene is involved, I'll say what? Autosomal, because there are autosomes. But if recessive allele is involved, then autosomal recessive disorders. And we have what? The last one is autosomal dominant disorders. I'll give you examples also, but for the time being, be honest with yourselves. Have you got this point? Why this type of classification? Let me give you an insight. So you have disorders involving a gene, disorders involving a single gene specifically. You need to make sure that you have understood this classification. So mutation in single gene, that's why you call it single gene disorder. This mutation, this disorder, this category of disorder will be following what? They'll be following Mendelian inheritance. That means Mendel's laws, law of unit character, law of dominance, law of segregation, law of independent assortment, they are all followed by these disorders which are on the board right now, because I have removed chromosomal disorders. They do not follow. So that's why you use the word Mendelian single gene disorders. Clear to you people? Okay. Are they inherited by generations? Are they inherited from one generation to another generation? Are they transferred? Yes, they are transferred. They follow this transmission process. Okay. Now you have these mutations happening to all the chromosomes. If they are happening to the sex chromosome, if they are happening to the autosomes, that's why you get the category. You get the sex-linked Mendelian single gene disorders, autosomal Mendelian single gene disorders. Here you have mutation happening to the sex chromosome. Specifically over here we are concerned with X chromosome. So if mutation has happened to the X chromosome, we will call them sex-linked disorders. And if mutations have happened to the autosomes, we will call them autosomal disorders. But remember, mutation is in single gene. Now if the mutation which has happened, if the allele, because every gene, as far as Mendel is concerned, every gene has got how many? It has got alternate forms, and those forms are called what? Alleles. Okay. Now, if the dominant recessive allele is mutated, you will call it X-linked recessive disorder. If the dominant allele is involved, you call it X-linked dominant disorder. Similarly, if in case of autosomes, the recessive allele is mutated, you will call it autosomal recessive disorder. If the dominant allele is involved, you will call it autosomal dominant disorder. This is the way things will be classified. Now let me give you an idea as far as Mendel is concerned. Let me be familiar with certain terms. They are very simple. What do you mean by basic thing which Mendel says is, first of all, a character. What is a character basically? What is a character? Any sort of morphological feature or any sort of physiological feature which is characteristic to an organism, that's called character. Say for example, my height. So let me give you what? Height. Let us talk in Mendel's language. Mendel was working with Pisum sativum, the pea plant. So let me say height of the plant. Height is basically what? Character, because it's a morphological character of the plant. Either it will be tall or it will be dwarf. Now whether it will be tall or dwarf, that means what? The expression of character. What do you say now? Expression of a character. Once we say expression, now what kind of expression it will be? It will be showing character, okay? What kind of expression a character will be showing? That's called a trait. What's that called, my dear student? That's called a trait. So what is a trait? Say for example, when you say tall, when you say dwarf, they are basically what? They are the two traits of a particular character. They are the traits of the height character. Okay. So you got to know about character. You got to know about the trait. What is the other term Mendel uses? What is the other term? Mendel uses a term called unit character. or let us say unit factor. What is this unit factor? This is current world's gene. Unit factor, for unit factor we use the word what now? We use the word gene now, which is the term which was used by Johansson. Now what is basically this unit factor? Is basically factor which controls a trait. Okay, it is something which controls a trait. It is something which is hereditary. A gene is basically transferred from one generation to another generation. If there will be some mutation in this gene, that will result to genetic disorders. Of which type? Mendelian single gene disorder. So unit factor is same as gene. Okay. So genes are basically those segments of the DNA which control a particular trait. Okay, so this is what Mendel used. Mendel used the term unit factor. Okay, now you have what? You have the first critical term, what you call allele. Okay, what is basically allele? Or you have the other term for allele, we call it allelomorph. Allelomorphs, or we call it an allelomorphic pair. Be aware of these things, they are very crucial. What is this basically? What are they? They're nothing different, my dear students. They are basically the, different forms of a particular factor. They are different, or you can say alternate forms. They are the alternate forms, alternate or different forms of a gene, or you can say a factor. Now you can ask, ma'am, what do you mean? Different forms. Do we have different forms of a gene? Yes. Say for height you have how many types of traits? Tall and dwarf. So for tallness you will have one allele. For dwarfness you will have another allele. So that means for the same gene. Say for example, I'll say I'm talking about gene of height. Gene of height has how many forms now? It has got two forms. You have the form of tallness, you have the form of dwarfness. Okay, so accordingly you have the two alleles. You have two alleles. One allele which is for tallness, one allele which is for dwarfness. They are the two different forms of the same gene. You are getting my point? The gene is the height. You're getting my point? It's very difficult. At times students get confused with these terms, but this is nothing difficult. This is basically, what is allele basically? So alleles are the two different forms of the same gene, the same factor. They are called alleles. Okay. Now my dear students, you know from Mendel's laws that some alleles are dominant alleles, some are recessive alleles. We are specifically sticking to, we don't want to go to polygenic inheritance, we don't want to go to quantitative inheritance, we don't want to confuse ourselves, because here we are concerned with Mendel's principles only. So in that way they are very easy. Okay, you don't have to think about other things. Okay, you have to think purely in terms of Mendel's concept. Okay, now let me make you understand what this recessive and dominant means. Once you talk about Mendel's concept, whereby he took a tall plant and he took a dwarf plant. Okay, they are pure tall per dwarf. Once he did a cross between the two, the F1 generation individual was, externally, phenotypically, it was what? It was tall. But once he did selfing, once he did what? Once Mendel did selfing of this tall, he was, fascinated, because he earlier thought he will get all the progeny tall. But he got tall as well as dwarf. I don't want to go to the ratios 3:1 and all. So what he got? He got tall as well as dwarf. He got to conclude that this tall, this was F2 generation, okay? He got to conclude that this tall of F1 generation basically had, now I'm using the term, it had basically two alleles. It had the allele for tallness as well as the allele for dwarfness. Okay, but in this particular F1 individual, since the organism appeared phenotypically, it appeared to be tall. So which is the allele which was expressed was the tallness allele, and which is the allele whose expression got masked? It's the dwarfness allele. So he said that this individual had two alleles. Once you have two forms of allele in which one expresses itself and one doesn't express itself, because every character is controlled by pair of alleles. So for height, he has two pairs of alleles. Every pair of allele, out of a pair of allele, if one expresses itself, it's called dominant. The other, whose expression is masked, is called a recessive allele. And for dominant allele, he used the uppercase letter. And for recessive allele, he used the lowercase letter. So this was the genetic constitution of this F1 individual. F1 individual was having one allele for tallness, one allele for dwarfness. Okay, so he has devised this methodology. For dominance, he uses the uppercase letter. For recessive feature, he uses the lowercase letter. So in this case, we will get to know that this is the dominant allele, this is the recessive allele. And we got to understand also, dominant allele expresses itself, recessive allele remains unexpressed in presence of the dominant allele. Its expression gets masked, so that the one dominant will show its feature, but the individual has a pair of alleles, out of which one is dominant, one is recessive. Now, is it necessary that the individual will have only this type of constitution? No. Sometimes both the alleles will be dominant. Sometimes both the alleles will be dwarfed, small t, that means the recessive ones. Okay. Accordingly, we get to understand about these two terms. These two conditions are homozygous conditions. What are these conditions called? They are called homozygous conditions. Over here you have same alleles. You have same alleles for a particular character. You have the same alleles. See your capital D, small t. Both dominant, both recessive. Okay. But in this condition, you have one dominant, one recessive, whereby the law of dominance plays its role. Here, there is no role of dominance. Here, both are same, it will be tall. Both are dwarf, both are recessive, it will be dwarf. Here, what comes into play is the law of dominance, which Mendel discovered that out of the two alleles, the one which expresses itself is the dominant. The one whose expression remains masked is a recessive allele. This condition, when both of the alleles are present in an individual, although you have these cases also, but this condition where you have both the alleles, both the contrasting alleles present, you call this condition heterozygous condition. What do you call this condition? Heterozygous condition. So when does law of dominance play its role? It plays its role in heterozygous condition. In heterozygous condition, when you have the opposite alleles present in an individual for a particular character, for the character of height, you have in this individual the opposite alleles present, the allele for tallness, allele for dwarfness. In this case, the allele which will express itself, that's called the dominant allele, and the allele which will remain unexpressed, whose expression will be masked by the other allele, that's called the recessive allele. Okay, and this condition is called a heterozygous condition. The other cases where both the alleles will be for tallness, both the alleles will be for dwarfness, these conditions are called homozygous conditions. And when will your recessive allele be able to express itself? When will that happen, that the recessive allele express itself? When will that happen? This is your question. When will that happen, that the recessive allele will express itself? Okay, when will that happen, that the recessive allele will express itself? Recessive allele usually remains unexpressed, but there is a case when recessive allele also express itself. That's this case. Here the individual will be dwarf. Although dwarfness was a recessive trait, but in plants will be able to express this trait also, but under what? Under homozygous recessive condition. This is the fundamental thing of your genetic disorders. Okay, so recessive features, recessive traits are expressed. Recessive traits appear. Under which condition? They appear under homozygous condition. When you have dominant trait can express itself under heterozygous condition. as well as under homozygous condition. If an individual is homozygous for a dominant trait, it will show it. If an individual is in heterozygous condition, again the dominant allele will show its expression. This is very important. You need to have a hold on this. Okay. So my dear students, there is another term which you have to understand over here, that whatever is the physical appearance of the plant, which we are able to see with our naked eyes, the external features like how much of the tall plant is, dwarf plant is, its seed, whether it's round or wrinkled, its pod shape, whether it is flattened or it's inflated, or it's somewhat opposite, or the position of the flower or the color of the flower. They are the external visible features. That is called the phenotype of the individual, whatever you look externally, okay, whatever you are able to observe externally, like your tallness and dwarfness. They are what? They are the external visible features. That represents the phenotype of the individual. Okay, now what is the genetic constitution behind that individual for that particular trait? What is the genetic constitution a plant can have for tallness? Is either homozygous condition, either heterozygous condition. Both conditions will produce what? They will both produce phenotypically a tall plant, but genotypically they could be different. They could be homozygous, they could be heterozygous. You are getting my point or not? That means an individual, whatever it is the phenotype of that individual, it's not necessary that you can decide the genotype out of that. Genotype could be different. These representations represent they represent the genotype of an individual. This is a nutshell I'm giving you information. So these two represent the genotype. The genetic constitution, the allelic constitution, the kind of alleles organism have. If we show this representation is called the genotype. And if we look at the visible characteristics, that is the phenotype of an individual. So tallness and dwarfness are what? Tallness and dwarfness, round seed, wrinkled seed, that is the phenotype. And for that particular phenotype, what is the genetic constitution within the cell? What type of alleles are present? That represents the genotype of the individual. So you got to understand that you will be having under Mendelian single gene disorders, some will be dominant allele involving disorders, some will be recessive allele involving disorder. In this way, this introduction was very hectic to get an insight into. Take a pause, try and understand these basic terms. If you have any question, if you have any confusion, don't hesitate. Type your query in the comment section below. I'll be answering that query. Okay. Let us now go to another thing which I have to take up before starting genetic disorders. The other thing which I want to talk about is very, very important. My dear students, do you remember in your childhood you used to draw family trees as an activity, school activity? You were supposed to go home and draw a family tree in which you show your grandparents, your great-grandparents, you use pictures to show them, then your parents, then your siblings and all. What do we call that tree? Absolutely. We call that a family tree. Okay. Same is the case over here also. Same is the case. What is being drawn in for understanding genetic disorders or understanding the pattern of inheritance of genetic disorders? What do we draw basically? We draw a family tree, what we call pedigree. What do we call? Pedigree. I'll be helping you to solve pedigree analysis questions later on at the end of this topic once we'll be done with all the genetic disorders. But what is pedigree? It is simply a family tree. Nothing difficult. So in pedigree, what do you basically show? You show the different generations. You show the generation from the forefather, maybe from the grandfather, the great-grandfather, then your mother, father, and your siblings. You show this family tree. That tree is called pedigree. Okay, you try to show all the generations of a family. Okay, and if we use the same tree to discuss or to explain the transmission of a trait, okay, if we study the trait, how it is transferred from one generation to another generation, we call that analysis pedigree analysis. I'll be training you to do that also. And while we'll be discussing genetic disorders, suppose we are taking hemophilia, I'll be showing you that, zigzag transference patterns. Say, for example, we have different inheritance patterns which we have to understand. Suppose zigzag transference we have to understand. Rather than understanding in an arbitrary way, we'll be using the pedigree charts to discuss the same. For that purpose, you need to remember certain symbols also. Because this is an introductory lecture, I will give you the basic symbols. The advanced symbols which will be taking up later on once we'll take this topic separately. So in pedigree, we don't need to write down male, female. We use the symbols. What do we use? Symbols. Look at the board. I'll be showing you a picture. This is how a pedigree tree looks like. Can you see these circles and these squares and these lines? They have meaning. Let me make you understand. And we'll be using the same pictures which is right now flashing on your board. We'll be using similar pictures to understand the inheritance of disorders, inheritance of traits in a particular family. Okay, so symbols. Let me make you understand what these symbols mean. Okay, you have a symbol of circle. A circle represents a female. Okay, a circle represents a female. Simple. Similarly, a square represents a male. Okay, and you have a diamond, which means some unspecified sex. An unspecified sex. You don't know about the sex over here. Okay. Okay. Now, if you draw the symbol like this, it means the individual is normal. There is no trait. Okay. There is no condition. But if you will fill the same symbol, if you will fill these symbols like this, you use a filled symbol. Okay. This filled symbol will give you an idea. Filled symbol means female is affected. Affected means she is showing some trait. Some disorder, maybe hemophilia, sickle cell anemia, whatever is the trait we are discussing right now. Similarly, filled square means the male is affected. Similarly, if we fill this diamond, it means that the individual is affected. So, a clean box, a clean circle and a filled circle has a distinction. If a circle is like this is normal. If a square is like this, it's normal. If a diamond is like this, it's normal. But if you fill them, it means the individual is showing some trait, it's showing some disorder. Okay, now the disorder, that remains the question. What sort of disorder the question speaks about. Okay, my dear students, at certain points we do like this. We draw a square with a diagonal line, a circle with a diagonal line. These two are the indications of death, means the individual are no more, they are dead. Okay, this shows death. Sometimes what do we do? Sometimes not, it's often you draw a square and you draw a circle and you join the two with a horizontal line like this. This horizontal line, this sleeping line has a meaning. It means marriage. What does it mean? Marriage, or it means mating. Okay, it indicates that this is a couple. This is a married couple. Okay, sometimes what do you do, my dear students? You draw a square and you draw a double line with a circle. This is again a mating, again a marriage, but it's a marriage between relatives, close relatives. Sometimes you have cousins marrying each other. That marriage is called consanguineous marriage. What is that called? Consanguineous marriage. So it's the marriage between closely related individuals. You can say the marriage between the cousins. That's called consanguineous marriage, and that is indicated with the help of a double line. Okay. Sometimes, my dear students, what we show is we show a square, we show a circle, and we half fill them. What do? We half fill them like this. Pay attention. This is very important. This half filled condition is a heterozygous condition. It is, okay, a heterozygous condition for some autosomal trait. So autosomal condition, or it's better to say heterozygous condition of autosomal trait. A heterozygous condition. Or similarly, you can say that they represent a carrier. I'll make you understand that later on. You have to remember for the time being, okay? Sometimes we draw a circle with a dot in the center. This is again a condition where we are trying to show a heterozygous condition, but this is related to a sex-linked trait, okay? This is a sex-linked trait. Okay, we will be in need of these structures once we will go to solving a pedigree. But once I'll be teaching you some genetic disorder, I'll be using these symbols. Okay, once I will make you understand what this carrier means and all, then I will be giving you certain advanced symbols also. These are the very basic symbols you must be well aware of. That means circle, a square, a diamond, and the other very important thing is this marriage, and yet another important thing is something like that. If you have a male and you have a female, line indicates they are married, well and good. Then if you draw a vertical line, okay, then again you draw a horizontal line. This will now show the offspring. This is the representation of showing the offspring of this married couple. Okay. Now we'll be showing the children. So this is a father, this is a mother. You cannot write anything in between. This is a father, this is a mother. Okay, because this is male, female. Father, mother. Why father, mother? Because there is a line. They are married to each other. Then you have vertical line indicating that now we will show their children. Their children are, say for example, a male, a boy, a girl, and a boy. Okay, this simple representation, this I will encircle this in a black thing. This simple representation is basically what? This is basically a pedigree. This is basically what? A pedigree, a family tree, a simple family tree, a nuclear family, father, mother, and their 3 children, 2 male and 1 female. Now, if say for example, I'm giving you an idea. If father has some trait, say for example, father is suffering from sickle cell anemia, say for example, okay, or any traits for that matter, then how do we show that trait? We fill the box. Okay, we fill the box. Filling means that this father has some trait, and then we investigate the genetic reason for that trait. That means we go into understanding the disorder. Then we can predict on the same tree. We can predict that how this trait is transferred, whether it will go to male individuals, female individuals, whether it will go to the father, son, or whether the individual will become a carrier. So if we use the same tree to investigate the transmission of characters from one generation to another generation, that analysis is called what? That is called what? That is called pedigree analysis. So isn't pedigree analysis important for understanding genetic disorders? Yes, that is very, very important for understanding genetic disorders. How many generations? Your question. How many generations are there in this pedigree right now? How many generations? You have to type the answer. How many generations are there in this pedigree right now? Do you have 1 generation, 2 generation? And give me the description of this generation, this pedigree which is right now on the board. Write in 2 lines about this pedigree which is on the board. Okay. Now, why I showed you these pedigrees? Why I show you these pedigree is basically we are going to start genetic disorders. We will be understanding their inheritance, whatever be the disorder, we'll be studying their inheritance by means of these pedigrees. We will not be doing like male, female, XX, XY, the way teachers teach you generally is not a correct way for this particular class. You need to start your investigations by using pedigrees. Okay, now my dear students, we are coming to the end of today's video. Before ending this video, I just want you people to give you a couple of examples of the 4 different types of Mendelian single gene disorders. So my dear students, I have kept my board ready with this stuff because this is the conclusion of our hard work which we have been doing from the past, I don't know the time duration, how much of the time it was I shot this video. This is the nutshell we have till this point. In order to draw this sketch, we need to have this information which I shared with all of you, okay? So genetic disorders are of 2 types, categories: Mendelian single gene disorders. My dear students, I hope that you found this video useful. I tried to give you this crux of Mendelism so that you'll be benefited from botany aspect as well. And I tried to make it as informative as possible. I gave you an introduction of pedigrees also. As far as these examples for genetic disorders are concerned, I'll be sharing that clip which is of about 12 to 15 minutes. I'll be uploading that separately as Understanding Genetic Disorders Part 3. Okay, I'll be uploading that within 1 or 2 days, no worries at all. And till then, I want you people to explore Part 2 carefully. And don't forget to like, share and subscribe to my channel, and simultaneously comment, because your comments are going to be basically a kind of motivation. I have already told you these comments motivate me and I get motivated to make other videos. So I'll be trying to fulfill that demand also. Some students are asking for crash course. I'll be trying my best to make a crash video on physiological part also. Okay, take care. Fi amanillah.